Hi everyone, Ashley here and welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm sharing how to make this festive holiday card featuring lots of cats, which if you've been watching my channel for a while you know are some of my favorite animals. I love cats, I'm a huge cat lover, so I was super excited to make this card and design it with that custom sentiment. So without further ado, let's get into the card making. I am starting by stamping out all of the images that I'm going to use on this card, and you can see my cat popping in throughout the whole card making video. She'll make little appearances. So I'm stamping out these images using my Mini Misty stamping tool, using some Gina K amalgam black ink, which is great for Copic coloring, onto some Nina Solo white paper. Just inking up those stamps and then stamping them out and really pressing down to make sure I get a good impression. I'm using this fancy stamping pressure tool that I've seen a lot of other people use in videos to get a nice even pressure on their stamping tool or stamp impressions. I actually had my husband make this for me by hand, so that was a really nice treat. And it actually does help kind of apply nice even pressure to those images as you stamp them out, and it just allows you to get a nice stamped impression. I'm just stamping them out twice to make sure I do get a nice clean black impression on those stamps, and then I'm going to start by coloring them in, again just using my Copic markers. I'm not going to show how I colored every single stamped image because that would take a long time, but I am going to focus on a few just so you can kind of get an idea of my coloring process. I'm starting with one of the cats, and for this cat I decided to color it gray. As you've seen, if you've ever watched any of my other videos, as well as already in this one, I have a gray Russian blue cat named Luna who likes to make appearances in lots of my videos, but she's just in general always around. She loves to be in my craft room. She actually stole my craft room chair at one point and has never given it back, so I had to bring in a second chair, and there is a whole second chair just in my craft room for Luna to sit on, which she loves. And she's just the cutest cat. I love her so much. So whenever I make cards with cats, I always have to color one gray. Moving on to the second cat here, who will be on the other side of the tree, I'm coloring this one with a little bit of a darker gray. These are the neutral gray Copic markers. So for Luna, the first cat, I colored her in using the cool gray Copic markers, or the C. And for this cat, I'm coloring with the N, so the neutral gray. You can see it's just a bit of a different gray tone. But I'm using the same technique where I started with the darkest shade, and then I'm blending it out little by little with the medium shade, and then I'll come in with the lightest shade and blend all of that out as well. And I like to apply the darkest shade just in areas where the shadow would hit, or where the light wouldn't hit, I should say, and where there would be shadows, and then just work my way out from there so that the lightest areas are the areas where the light would be hitting. When I'm done all of that, I do like to come back in with my darkest shade and add a little bit of dimension by just going over those dark areas again, and that just really adds an extra layer of dimension and depth. I'm using some red tones to go around and color in a few of the other images. I started with the Santa hats, of course, and now I'm just coloring in some of the presents and ribbons. And for these, I'm just using two different red shades, so a dark red and a light red, and just starting with the dark and blending it out with the light. I'm doing the same with a few of the other images here. I colored in some of the bulbs yellow, and now I'm coloring in this reindeer hat with some browns. For all of the colors, I'm just generally using a very similar technique where I start with the darkest shade and blend it out with the lighter shade. And if I feel like I need to, I will go back in with the darker shade just to add that extra pop of depth. I started by focusing on some sort of traditional Christmas colors, the red and the green, but I'm starting to incorporate some other colors, so a yellow, a light blue, and now this light purple, just to add a little bit of extra pops of color. And what I tend to do when I have lots of little images like this is pick one color and kind of just go through all the images and color in the things I want to be that color. And I kind of just, go back and forth between the colors when I start to decide what I want to be what. So going around and coloring in a whole bunch of the little red things and then a whole bunch of little purple things, adding touches of yellow and blue here and there until everything is colored in. Now I'm coloring in these little tree stamps, which I actually don't end up using on this card, but I will save them and use them on a different card because they are so versatile for Christmas or wintry scenes. So that's totally fine. Again, I'm starting with the darker green on those and blending it out with a lighter green on each of those sort of tiers. And as a final touch on these images, once I'm done coloring them all in, I'm just taking a white gel pen and going through and adding little accent lines. I really like the way that this looks. It kind of makes the images more cartoony. And how I like to do this is just add little lines and little dots, again in those areas where I think there would be highlighting. I try to tend to focus on sort of one side of the image, so go all the way down the right side, for example, with these little lines, although I sort of go outside of that and it all ends up looking okay. Okay, so once I'd finished coloring those images, it's time to start building the rest of the card. I'm starting with this square white panel that will be sort of the focal point of the background. And I'm blending this using Distress Oxide ink. So I've got 4 shades here, and I'm starting with squeezed lemonade and a small brush to blend on a small circle of yellow. The idea behind this was that I wanted there to be sort of like a halo effect or like a spotlight behind the images. And as you'll see, or as you might have seen in the thumbnails, and as you'll see in the finished card, there's going to be a Christmas tree there. So I really wanted there to be sort of this bright pop of yellow behind the Christmas tree. After I'm done with that yellow circle, I'm coming in with another blending brush and blending on some Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, which is a very light blue. And I'm just blending that all the way around that yellow circle. And the idea is for that yellow to be sort of fading into the sky. So I didn't want a harsh line between that yellow and the blue of the sky. I just wanted sort of a nice light blend and a very subtle sort of fade. So that's why I chose this really light color, and I'm just gently going around, trying not to actually overlap them too much, because as you start to overlap these colors, you're going to get green. And I didn't want to get green, so I'm just sort of gently applying that light blue around that circle of yellow in a bit of a halo, and allowing the colors to sort of fade into each other. Once that's done, I'm coming back in with an even darker blue shade. This is Salvage Patina, and just doing the same thing with my blending brush where I go around in a circle and try to blend those two together. So blending the Salvage Patina, which is that darker blue, with the Tumbled Glass, which is the really light blue. And so I'm just taking my blending brush and going back and forth between the two colors to get a nice blend. Kind of keeping that circular pattern the whole time because I really wanted it to look like the color was radiating out from that central focal point of yellow out towards the sky and get darker and darker as it radiated out. Here I am coming back in with some Tumbled Glass, just again kind of going back and forth between Salvage Patina and Tumbled Glass until I get that faded look that I want. So if you're kind of trying to replicate this at home or doing a similar blending technique, just keep going back and forth between the colors until you get that blend that you want. Finally, I'm taking my darkest color, which is Peacock Feathers, this dark turquoise, and I'm taking a new blending brush and just applying that to the very outer edges of the piece and sort of blending it in at the corners to kind of maintain that circular radiating shape that I really wanted. So I continued to go back and forth between the colors using all my brushes until I got a nice blend. When I was done that, now it's time to add this pattern. So this is a stencil from Lawn Fawn. It is their Snowflake background stencil, and it comes with 2 different stencils that together fill in the whole background stencil or snowflake pattern. So I'm starting with the first stencil, which has half of the pattern, and I'm taking the same colors of inks that I used to blend the background and just blending through the stencil. So I did some yellow in that focal point in the middle, and now I'm using some Salvage Patina to blend on sort of in the outer parts where the blue had been applied initially. Then I can take the second stencil in the set and just place it down, focusing on where it should be filling in the blanks from the first stencil. And once it's in place, I can put it down with my magnets, and then I'm taking this pearlescent stencil paste and just stenciling or applying that stencil paste through the stencil using my palette knife until I get a nice even layer. And this pearlescent stencil paste is by Lawn Fawn. It's really pretty. It's sort of like a shiny white. And once you apply it in a thin layer through that stencil and pull the stencil back, you'll see that it leaves that beautiful snowflake pattern, which is sort of 3D and elevated because of the sort of texture and depth of the paste. So I put that aside to dry, and then I can move on to assembling the rest of my card. So I die cut the word Meowie out of Finley's ABCs, which is just an ABC die set from Lawn Fawn, and I cut it out twice out of white cardstock and once out of white sparkle cardstock. And I'm just gluing together all those pieces for each letter to kind of add a little bit of dimension to the letters and make them seem like almost 3D pieces. So I glued the 2 white pieces together, and then I can glue the white glittery piece on top. And then that will spell out the word Meowie. Off to the side, you'll also see that I cut out some other pieces that will go into sort of the background of this card. So I cut out a red rectangle out of pattern paper. This is a beautiful pattern paper by Lawn Fawn. It's got these beautiful silver foil sparkles on it, or snowflakes on it. I also cut out a white square out of just white cardstock, and then I have that blended piece, which is a slightly smaller square. So I'm gluing the blended piece onto the white square so that you see that white border around it. I just think that gives it a nice finishing touch. I also cut out a piece of white sparkle cardstock using that same white square die and then a hillside border die to create that sort of ground for all of the images to sit on. Once those are all together, I can glue them onto that red piece towards the top, which will leave a little bit of space for that sentiment at the bottom. So the design of this card will be that the scene is in the square at the top and the sentiment is just below the square. I'm just holding those pieces down so that they're really glued well together. And then I can take the whole thing and glue it onto a white card base. And this is just an A2 size card, so that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. Now off camera, I did go ahead and assemble a few more pieces that will go onto this card, one of them being this beautiful die-cut Christmas tree. I didn't show how I made this Christmas tree in this video because I've shown a few other videos that assemble similar dies. I'll link one of them up in the top right corner of this video. It's actually the lovely latte mug die, but it's the same type of thing where you die cut all the parts and you die cut the frame and then you sort of puzzle piece them together. So I did that for the tree. I also cut out all of my stamped images and sort of laid them onto the card in an arrangement that I thought was cute. And of course I glued some of the pieces together that needed to be glued, like the little hat onto the cat and a little ornament into its hand. And once I've done all of that, I can start to stick the pieces down onto the card in the scene that I've decided on. So I've skipped ahead because I've glued everything down. I used foam squares for a bunch of the images and some of them I just used double-sided tape. Then it's time to stick down these letters and form the sentiment. I decided I wanted them to actually pop out with some green behind them just to give them a little bit of sort of popping out from that red background and draw the green down onto the bottom of the card as well. So I cut out the letters again out of green cardstock and then I can glue them down, leaving a little bit of an offset so you see that green peeking up behind each letter. Then I can glue them down onto the bottom of that card below the scene, and I decided to do it in sort of an arched arrangement so that the word meowie is sort of like on a bit of an arch. I just thought that was a neat detail. Off camera, I also stamped out the rest of the sentiment in green ink, "May your days be," and then "and bright." So the whole sentiment together says, "May your days be meowie and bright." Of course, meowie is meant to be a pun on the word merry. So really it should say, "May your days be merry and bright," but instead it says, "May your days be meowie and bright." I just used some double-sided tape behind those little strips to add them just above and below that word meowie so it finishes off the sentiment. And that is it. The card is complete. There's a lot of elements in this card, so just for the sake of timing, I unfortunately didn't have time to show all of them, such as the creation of that tree, but I hope that you got the gist of it, and I hope that you're inspired to create something like this on your own, and it was really a lot of fun. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you want to see more of my cards, make sure to head over to my Instagram account, which is linked down in the video description below. You can also check out that video description for all of the supplies I used in this video, and head over to my channel homepage to see even more videos, which I post weekly. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!